Welcome to our February Masterclass. Stop hiring, start building a team. You all are here because you're excited to learn about what it looks like to hire people the right way and talking about different processes. And today we're going to talk through all of the important pieces of how you craft and how you perfect your hiring process, and maybe more importantly, why that is so important. So we'll walk through the process that we use at Business on Purpose for our clients and ourselves every single time that we make a new hire. So get ready, buckle up. Let's see. I'm Chad. I'm one of the coaches here at Business on Purpose. If you heard me earlier, I'm located outside of Charlotte in Belmont and love it here. The Queen City is a lovely place to live, work. And so, yeah, I get the privilege of liberating business owners from chaos so they can make time for what matters most. I want to introduce our co-host today. This is Mandy Brown of Bosun Solutions. Mandy, say hi. Give them a little background on yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mandy. I am Director of Operations at Bosun Solutions and really always excited to talk about hiring and making sure people are successful in everything that they do. So I'm really excited to jump in and join this conversation.
Great. We are pumped to have Mandy here. Bosun is great. You're going to get to hear a little bit more about them as the call goes on. Mandy's going to share more of kind of what they do and how they do it, and why, again, these processes and everything are so important. So this is a picture of my family from this past fall. We've got three kids that are very unique in all of their personalities. That's my wife, Becca. This was, if you've got little kids or you've had little kids, this is amazing that they're all looking sort of at the camera, that you have almost all of us looking there. That's my little daughter, Cece, who carried that pumpkin around like it was a stuffed animal for the next week. My son, Bear, our middle child, that's laying on the pumpkin and is maybe the most unique individual that I have the pleasure of being around. And then my older son, CJ, is right there. We're a big sports family. Soccer is our main one. Just to give you a little background, but we'll do basketball, we do baseball. But if you're looking at those sports, and this is a great thing, is you look at those, to be successful in those, you really need to be on the same page as your whole team, right? In order to be successful for the long haul, you need to be pulling and moving in the same direction. You have to be unified in vision, you have to be unified in mission, and you've got to fully understand what you're trying to accomplish, right? Especially sports like basketball and football and soccer. Like I said, ones that we spend a lot of time on those sidelines. We watch, that's when the team is really successful. You could have one person be a hero and play kind of hero ball, and you're going to win some games, but you probably are never going to quite achieve the same heights as if you're all, again, pulling, moving in the same direction, like this lovely photo of a tug of war. Hopefully that gives you some great memories and not some awful PTSD. But you want to be able to help that team achieve long-term championship success. It's the same thing that we see in business and in the process of building a team that helps you succeed. There's plenty of teams out there that just want the most talented athletes or just the most talented people, right? We look at accomplishments and we say, oh man, that person, we've got to have them be a part of our team. But oftentimes these teams, they never make it across the finish line because talent without alignment creates friction. To give you another example, the teams that we remember, they might have a few stars on them, but they also have a bunch of players that we don't remember as well. I want you to think of these guys, right? The 1990s Chicago Bulls, right? Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, the three biggest names by far. I think this picture is funny, right? Like it's even Michael and Scottie are staying the same. Dennis Rodman, he was pretty good, but he was maybe a tier below them. But do you remember everybody else? Because it wasn't just those three, right? You had all of these guys on the 96, 97 team. There are guys on there, and I watched most of those games, and there's people on this picture that I do not recognize anymore. There's guys like Luke Longley and Tony Kukoc, if you remember them, or Ron Harper. Even Steve Kerr, the Warriors coach, was on, part of these teams. And then from my hometown, John Paxson. He's the one guy that was the role player that I always knew and loved because he was from my hometown. And, he made it big. But here's the thing. Those 6 championships, they don't happen if it's just Michael, Scotty, and Dennis. They needed all of these people on the court. They needed all those guys in the suits behind them to help them get better at what they're doing. And they had to work as a whole team together. What we hear some of the time is like some combination of the following from a lot of our clients is, and maybe you've said these, is we just need better people. Or maybe you've heard or said nobody wants to work anymore. And maybe this one, man, this one is, I knew it wasn't right, but we just needed somebody. We just needed someone. We just needed another warm body on the roster to help us do this task or that task. But behind all these statements, what you don't have is you don't have a people problem. You actually have a process problem. And when you don't have a process, you hire emotionally out of desperation and excitement or hope, but those aren't strategies. Those are not strategies that are going to help you win in the long term, that are going to help you build a team and achieve what you want to achieve with your business. What we need to do is we need to replace those emotions with clarity. And hear me say this, hiring is not just a singular event. Hiring is a system. And it's a system that creates predictability, cultural alignment, accountability, and then ultimately in the job creates freedom. And if you lack clarity before you hire, you are going to absolutely multiply chaos after that. I'll say that again. If you lack clarity before you hire, you will multiply chaos after it. So before you post a job or you begin to hire, some of the things that you need to answer questions, something like, why is this seat existing? What is the need here? You have to define this. What outcomes do we need it to produce? What does winning look like after 90 days? By the way, that's called onboarding, and it's massively important. You have to have a system for onboarding. We'll talk about that. If you cannot define the win, though, with questions like that, you cannot hire for the win. If you cannot define the win, you cannot hire for that win. Another way to put it is if you cannot support this new hire, you cannot make this hire. So to back it up a little bit and just to talk about how do we find that foundation and beginning of those processes, something that as we were walking through things with clients, BOP, we work to build out, we clearly define all of the processes that make up your business. I know some of y'all are clients on here and some of y'all have not worked with us yet. And so we build this out with the four kind of building blocks, cornerstones of purpose, people, process, and profit. We do this through our operating system that builds out what we call our master process roadmap. Those things that sits on top of purpose, people, process, and profit. And then that flooring supports your sales, your marketing, your operations, and your administrative piece. All the pieces that it takes to run all the parts of your business. Okay. And this is how we support and how we have the foundation and the culture and the direction in place to implement a hiring process. And so I'm going to pull this up. I'm pull up a picture of our hiring process that later on would be happy to send you a copy of. Our emails will be at the end and you can just send us an email and we'll send that over to you and point out a couple of things for you. But this is part of our hiring process looks like. There's 2 slides on this. So again, you see up at the top, the pre-recruiting. Are we defining the gap? Are we defining the role? Are you defining the budget? How much are you going to pay that person? How much is it really going to cost you, right? Outside of just their salary, we know that to bring somebody on, the cost is not just what you put in their paycheck, but their cost is obviously much more. Are there internal candidates? Yes, no. And are you sharing this opportunity with key stakeholders, key leaders, key people as a part of your business? Then that's all before you actually get to some of the first parts. Step 1, your phone interview, discussion, and then you evaluate it through the lens of the defining the gap, the role, the budget, all of that you did the work on ahead of time. You do that through that phone interview and afterwards. Step 2, you have your first live interview with the person. You share your mission, your vision. You share your unique core values, your org chart. So they know really, hey, what does it look like? What is it, for me to be a part of this company? We are a business that, right? And here's what being a team member means. Here's the general compensation structure, but we want to save that specific compensation structure for a couple steps later. Step 4, you can see that. And then we're going to send copies of different tools or resources, and we're going to share our vision, mission, values with them, different case studies or videos, and our org chart. We want to be totally clear in what we're bringing them potentially into. Step three, that's where we're going to kind of do some of our due diligence, our due diligence on our action items on it. We're going to ask them to complete a couple different assessments. At BOP, we use our DISC profile and the Working Genius assessment. If you haven't looked into those are phenomenal in terms of how you can piece together a team, what different people value, how they operate in different places of stress, do that, how they operate publicly versus privately, how do they perceive themselves and how they operate. We're going to give them some homework, items connected to the future role, homework on a brief vision of what they would see down the road. And then we're going to, even obviously contact references. I can't tell you how many times, right? Like I've filled out to be a reference for somebody and I've never been contacted. You've got to contact those people. It's very important to get that full picture of who that person is and what they're bringing to the table so that you know if they really are going to be a fit for what you need them to be a fit for. Step four is your second live interview. We're going to be a little bit more specific on the role discussion. And then you're going to talk about how do we train you? How are we going to bring you in? How are we going to show you what we do and how to do it in the way that we want it done? We're going to, for us, we're going to talk about the master process roadmap. We're going to show them our operating system. And then what are the key benchmarks, key performance indexes? What's your weekly schedule going to look like? And then after that, we're going to get into those specifics on compensation structure so they know clearly how are they being compensated? What does that look like? Step five, this one's a little bit more optional, but gosh, I would say that it is, if at all possible, is very vital. It's going to be a casual kind of social get to know you. Maybe you bring their spouse into that. It's a lunch, maybe going to get coffee, someplace where you can see them interact, talk about themselves, their life experiences, their work experiences, and you can see them interact with them in a way that is much more revealing as opposed to who they really are. Again, as you're building a team, that matters. You don't want just the ego-driven person that's coming in or the person who's only driven by money. You want to say, hey, what does this person really look like at all times? And then step six becomes the agreement of expectations. You're going to walk through the employment agreement and you're going to send over the offer via the email. But you'll see on here on the bottom, step seven, hiring is not done. I said it before. It's not just a singular event. It is a system. It is a whole process. And it does not stop at day one. It stops only after someone is fully onboarded and aligned with the vision, the mission, the values of your company, as they're getting trained in how to do the job that you've hired them to do. And so that step seven of onboarding, unbelievably important that so many different people honestly forget. I'm sure all of us could raise our hands about times that we have been hired to jobs, whether it was, high school and bagging groceries or potentially even, your first job out of college or whatever it might be, that you weren't really onboarded. There wasn't a plan for how you onboarded that person, for how you were brought in, for how you were trained to fit into the culture and what the expectation truly was. And then at the end of that, that's when you really have finished the hiring process. Are they still a good fit after they finish the onboarding? And Mandy's going to talk a little bit about that here in just a second. But yeah, and so now that I've kind of shared all of that with you all, actually, I'm going to kick it over to Mandy a little bit and would love for her to just share a little bit, just maybe times that you have seen because Bosun and Business on Purpose, we work together a bunch and they've helped with a lot of hires for clients that we have worked with. And so would love, Mandy, could you just share a little bit about just some maybe specific examples of places where you've seen the process work really well, both in having that person stay on for the long term, or maybe I think there's one we were talking about where they went through the process and it was like, hey, they're not a fit. But because of the process, we knew that was true. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And again, a little bit about Bosun. So we do recruiting and we have three different buckets of ways that we do recruiting, and I can get into that a little more later. So we do have the opportunity to see a lot of hiring, a lot of onboarding, and it's always a learning experience every new client we get because everyone just has different preferences. But to Chad's point, when we're working with BOP clients, we love them because they're following a process and there's so much clarity in the process. And that really sets us up really well to make that exceptional hire. We typically, when there is a BOP client, they're following the process, we can do the hiring in half the time because we have clarity in who we're looking for that allows for our interviews to be more productive. We're setting up candidates really well to understand the process, to understand what they're signing up for. And so everyone's more on the same page throughout the entire process. We even, what I was telling Chad beforehand was we had one client that is a BOP client as well, and they hired someone, and they're one of our favorite clients because, again, there's always clarity in who we're looking for. And they ended up hiring someone, and because they have a process specifically with onboarding, they identified quickly that this person wasn't a fit. You know, sometimes we can do everything right, and then at the end of the day, they aren't everything that they said they were going to be. And it was a very technical role. And they called us and they said they actually can't do the job from a technical standpoint. And because there were so many clear expectations up front, it was easy to let them go. And I don't say that lightly. I know none of us, if you've ever had to fire anyone, it is not a fun experience. Sometimes, if you've worked with a bigger organization, it's also a headache because you have to get HR involved and then you have to backtrack and make sure things were written out and clear. However, if you do operate with a lot of clarity throughout that onboarding about what expectations you should be hitting at different intervals, then you can make that quick termination and get right back on track. And the wrong hire is expensive. And so if you can do it quickly, it really sets you up well. So, Chad, do you want me to go into the rest
Yeah,
or?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Let's launch in.
Okay, great. Okay. So, everything that you just saw in the hiring process is strong. The structure is there, the assessments are there, the onboarding checklist is there. But again, here's what I've learned after years of recruiting and leading teams that even the best process can't compensate for a lack of clarity in vision. And so hiring usually fails with a leader or hiring manager struggling to find or communicate. Yeah, you can move ahead, Chad. Thank you. Usually struggling to find or communicate a clear vision of a role. So in my experience, it either fails because there are too many non-negotiables or because there are none at all, but that is because there's just not clarity and vision in this hire. And so that middle ground, that's where successful hiring lives. So we'll go to one extreme. The first extreme is the unicorn list. I'll get on a call with a client, a construction owner, and they'll say, okay, we need a PM. I'm like, great. We do PMs all the time. This is great. And then they'll go through their list of all the requirements of that PM. They need a book of subs. They need to bring business. They need to manage clients. They need to run a crew. They need to have leadership experience. They need to be a culture fit. Also, it is just an entry level project manager role, so it's a mid level pay. Okay, that's going to be great. That's not a role, that is a wish list. And here's the issue with that there's just too many non negotiables, and that creates long searches and compensation mismatches and eventually compromising a hire. And when that happens, then we switch to the other extreme, which is desperation hiring. And this is where we can end up. Some people start here when maybe they realize someone left and then they're like, oh my gosh, I need that warm body, like Chad said. But that desperation hiring is the organization is overwhelmed, projects are stacking up, margins are slipping, and we get to that point of, I just need a warm body. But in that, there's no clarity, no ownership, no defined outcome, and desperation hiring is very expensive hiring. Both of these approaches, the unicorn list and desperation hiring, they both create chaos just in different ways. And so the question becomes, what does disciplined hiring actually look like? And in my experience, it starts with choosing one true non-negotiable. And I say one true non-negotiable, obviously, if it's a technical role, right? There are technical needs behind that role. That isn't part of it. But every role should have just that one non-negotiable that it's typically something a little intangible. So maybe it's just, I need someone with extreme ownership or a very specific culture fit trait. I just met with a client this week who said, I need someone with a competitive nature. And if you can find a former athlete, that would be great. Which is awesome because I don't know if I can find a former athlete. I'm looking at resumes and I was a college softball player, so I get that and I was understanding what the client was saying, but not all of us former athletes have that on our resume, so that's hard to find. But it provided clarity in what he was saying and what he was looking for, clarity in the vision of the person. And so I could actually understand kind of those soft skills that this client would be looking for. And even I just talked to someone for a more office role, and they were saying I need a jovial personality for this office role. It's typically a role where this person can kind of be pessimistic. And then they explained the impact that this person would have in the office. And again, that's laying vision into what would be a good fit for this hire. And so those are great. Those are great non-negotiables. And that is more vision casting in what that can be. So most skills can be trained, but the core traits usually cannot. And so when I meet with a client, the first question I ask is, why are we here? And if they can't clearly explain the gap, the problem, or the elevation that the role creates, that's the real issue. I'm looking for a director of restoration right now, and the whole why behind this role is our client has a team of 10 PMs and he's just trying to find a way to elevate these people who've been in the role for 10 and 20 years and kind of stuck in their way. And so he's needing a leader that can help develop these PMs a little more. And that's great. That's the elevation that this role is going to create. And that provides vision for who we're looking for. But if leadership can't articulate the gap, then a recruiter, we can't sell it. And then a candidate won't feel it and won't align with it. So again, I always ask, why are we here? Every role should wake up and know, regardless of their role, whether is that office person or that senior leader, why am I here? What does winning look like? And if that isn't clear internally for you as the leader, the hiring manager, then it won't be clear externally either. And that clarity starts at the top, not in the interview. One of my favorite leadership books, I hope some of you have read it already, but it's Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why. It's a great book for this concept. So while the book focuses on selling a why to your customers, the whole idea of the book is that everything is explained first with the why, and that changes the ownership of team members if done well. As a director of operations, I'm constantly wanting change. I'm constantly wanting to be better, and I'm having to sell that to my team. And so to do that, I have to start with my why. Why am I here? And then that's easier to make the change. People can get behind that. And so same with hiring, someone knows their why. Why are you here? And then they can start owning their role. So now let's assume we've hired the right person. And this is where most companies think the hard part is over. But it's not, because onboarding fails when clarity disappears after the hire. So even when you hire well, and onboarding just fails when clarity disappears. And my cringe moment is when I hear, I don't have time to onboard or train someone. I just need someone that fits. Like, we're just ready to rock and roll. That is not good. That is not good. Even if I'm hiring a controller where the role is pretty cut and dry, or a bookkeeper, they'll still need onboarding and training into the culture. Chad, like you, I'm a sports fan. Yeah, I told you I played softball, and I think about Tom Brady, right? He was with the New England Patriots, top dog. He's always winning Super Bowls. He's great. And then he goes over to Tampa Bay. And I mean, this quarterback who is great, one of the best, arguably, you can list others if you'd like as well, but truly one of the best. And when he changes teams, changes companies, he still has to onboard into Tampa Bay's systems and process and culture. And it didn't start off seamlessly. They struggled, and then eventually it worked its way up. So I'm like, if Tom Brady has to switch companies and needs some onboarding, I feel like everyone needs it. So I get behind, like, you have to be able to train. And then I'll have companies say, I'm not happy with my hire. They're not doing X, Y, and Z. And so my first question is always, okay, how did they respond when you told them that? And most of the time the answer is, oh, well, we haven't. And I'm like, okay, unspoken expectations are not expectations. And that's where onboarding does break down. It's not enough to have them shadow someone or here's the Google Drive, hope you can find everything because you're supposed to be resourceful. You have to define the ownership. So clarity isn't about micromanaging, it's about defining ownership in stages. So onboarding in particular, it's 30 days or 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. So we can use a PM as an example. And let's say by 30 days, PM, the expectation of this role is own 25% of the project communication independently. And you'll have to define what that looks like. So maybe they'll own the communication, but copy a senior PM or a leader. That way they can continue to get live feedback on their communication. And then 60 days, they're managing 50 to 60% of the projects with limited oversight, but then still having, weekly one-on-ones and being able to have that live time feedback. And then the goal is by 90 days, they fully own all assigned projects and then define margin targets, right? You have your KPIs, your reporting cadence. And I know those are still pretty high level goals and honestly not as measurable, but even these kind of goals give people something to march toward. And when people know what they're marching toward, they move faster. And when you feel like maybe in that 6 day area where there's a question that they should know, you just go ahead and let them know that too. And then they start feeling confident doing it. And so when hiring feels painful, I usually see one of three things missing: clarity in the gap, clarity of or lack of clarity of that non negotiable, and lack of clarity of expectations after day one. And so at Bosun, obviously our job is to take the work off your plate. We love to do that. You shouldn't be in interviews. You shouldn't be reviewing resumes. You shouldn't be reaching out to people to see if they're looking for a job. That should not be on you. And that's great when a recruiting firm can do that for you. But what we also do at Bosun is just force a little bit of clarity and help define that gap, the compensation alignment, and that one non-negotiable, and that structure that ensures retention. And so we are meeting with clients ahead of time, trying to figure out that clarity, and then also continuing to meet with them weekly to see where we need to adjust and see if the vision's changing, see what's happening within the office and the organization. So it is so fun to be able to do that. And it really is an honor to be able to help people. And it's a cool seat to be able to see so many companies continue to grow as they're hiring and successfully hire and retaining those team members. So, Chad, I can go into Bosun, or if we want to stop and ask questions, we can go wherever you'd like to go from here.
Yeah, why don't we just maybe talk through just a couple of the things that you all offer
Sure.
real quick, and then we'll do just a few minutes of Q&A at the end. That'd be great.
Yeah. Okay, absolutely. So, like I said, we have three buckets at Bosun, and the whole point is again to keep the business owner in mind. And so we have fractional roles, and these are just filling gaps, handling overflow. And these are those really, they help scale growth when you're trying to figure that out. This is a great solution if you're like, I'm not sure where the official gap is, but I know we have this immediate need and there's something that we need to go ahead and hand off, but maybe it's not a full-time role yet and you're still trying to identify that. That's a great solution for that. And then we have flat fee recruiting, which is where you're saying, I need that project manager. Here's what I'm looking for. These are non-negotiables, and we go find that person. And then we have, this is personally my favorite, on deck recruiting. It's a year-long talent partnership designed for if let's say you're hiring five people for the year. This allows it to be under a predictable monthly retainer instead of having to pay for each hire when they come, because you just don't know what time of year that's coming. And so you have a dedicated recruiter. They get to know your company, your organization, and they get to hire everyone for the year. And so they just really know you on a different level. And we have some BOP clients that are on this, and it's so fun because when they say like, okay, we're ready for this role, it's just, we're rocking and rolling and we're a well-oiled machine. So it's really a great solution for those that are having multiple hires in a year.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that, Mandy. And I really cannot speak the praises of Bosun enough. They're phenomenal. They've done great work with a bunch of our clients, like Mandy's talked about. And yeah, we're always happy to bring them in and partner with them on things. They do a phenomenal job. We've got a couple minutes left. If anyone has any questions, why don't you just throw it in the chat and Mandy and I can answer those, or you can come off mute, actually. I'm sorry. You can come off mute and answer those. That'd be great if anyone has any.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, come on, Melissa. Yes.
As far as, I'm sorry, and you might have said it in there, but I was also communicating with some other agencies. As far as the hiring process and the interviews, are you guys actually doing those interviews and then the candidate is coming in ready to just start with us, or are we part of that process of interviewing?
Oh, good question. Yes. So if we're doing like the on deck recruiting, the direct hire, or the flat fee hiring, we are doing that initial interview. So there's an initial, we do a 30-minute Zoom call. That way we can also see them and then we learn a lot about them, their background, and then we send that to you. And what that allows you to do, and through the BOP hiring process, you can start taking that into you can combine your interviews where you talk more into the vision and all of that right away. So we're speaking into the role, but you can speak more into, okay, these are the KPIs of the role. These are the goals of the role, and just go a little deeper. We're doing that initial screening of like, yes, they have the skill set, they have the soft skills, they have this. Now you, as the hiring manager or business owner, can take it just a step, start taking it a step further to see if truly you can see them as a team member. And then for the fractional, it's the same, but we're operating with a bench of contractors already. And so we typically, again, it's typically filling some type of gap pretty quickly. And so that one, we rock and roll a lot quicker and say, hey, well, here's someone that would be a great fit for you. Would you like to meet with them, with me, and make sure that we're ready to move forward?
Okay. Sorry, I have another question too.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, absolutely.
as far as like the pool of candidates that are found, is that information given to the company that you're working with? So if we not doing like on deck recruiting, but doing the one role payment, somebody's hired, but there was a pool of candidates that came from that. Is that information given to the company so that if they need to hire in that role or add a second role in that role, or that it doesn't work out with the first person? Where does that information go?
Yeah. So whoever, for example, I just talked to a client and I said, "Hey, I'm not liking many people in this role." And she laughed and she's like, "It's a really hard geographical area to find someone." And so if I'm just moving people to disqualified and I don't like them, you would never know. You won't know about those people. However, we constantly keep a funnel because with our hiring, we also do a 90-day guarantee. So if something were to happen and you came back and said this person didn't work out, then I have a funnel already and we're ready to replace them. Or, which happens actually quite a bit, hey, I need another person in this role as well. Now growth has happened. I can continue to go back to that funnel. So we don't provide that to you. However, sometimes when we're presenting candidates to our clients, they're like, I like both of these people. Can I hire both of these people? Yes, that's also an option. And you can always reach out and ask who's in our funnel if there was anyone else and open up another search.
Okay,
It's
thank you.
constant, yeah, absolutely. Just constant conversation about what you're needing, then we can tell you who we have for sure.
That's great. Thanks, Melissa.
I've got a question real quick.
Go for it.
Maybe specific to the construction industry. What would you say has changed as far as maybe more of an effective strategy since COVID? It seems like hiring is just a lot different than it was before COVID. And it's almost like roles are reversed in a way. Sometimes it's more, what can you do for me, business owner hiring, than the other way around.
That's a great question, Christian. I think from our perspective, it really is how are we communicating clearly from the jump and throughout the whole process what being a part of, X company would look like and what are the expectations going to be. And I think for us, then, that allows us, and somewhat like Mandy was sharing about the client that they got to the end of the onboarding process and they said, hey, this is just not going to work out. What that does is it's going to provide you with that clarity so that honestly, I think outside of, some of those changing factors, which those are very real, like you're talking about, like, I think we are seeing, that attitude shift a little bit, but you're going to know as a business owner very quickly, are they a fit or not? and then if they're not, then because of the clarity, because of the open communication, we're going to be able to gracefully exit them out of the process and then move on to finding that right person again, as opposed to just going, well, we just need somebody, to fill that role. Mandy, anything you would add to that?
Yeah, I think what I'm learning is it's unique again to every geographical area, what they are seeing. But that is something that we truly, for example, I just met with a client yesterday and we're hiring a PM, same role we always have. And that was something they said, this is such a team environment. And we want someone that wants to be here. And Christian, it sounds like that could be something like this isn't about what is this company going to do for me, but how can I work hard? And that's part of just in the interviews and the vetting process, understanding what type of team player are they. And a lot of times if you ask open-ended questions, so much comes out. And so I can typically see right from the start where they're going and what they're looking for. And if it's all about them and what they need, or they talk about previous employers, then they are going to be a selfish employee. But if they're talking about more of, I had this great opportunity and this was a great opportunity, and it's more of a humble approach, then that's telling me that they're going to be more of a team player and honestly operate with a little more gratitude. I like to hire with like hungry, humble, smart. Those are the three. I'm trying to think where I got that from. If anyone knows, let me know. But that they're going to present with those three qualities, because then it's going to be more of a team hire instead of a selfish hire for that candidate. So all that to say, you can't find that in a resume. It's about vetting in the interview for it, which takes time.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. That helps.
Great. Yeah. Well, we're about up to time, and I just want to say we are grateful for all of you that hopped on. If you do have another question or you want to talk further, up right here are email addresses. We would love to connect with you further in the next few days and weeks. So feel free to shoot either Mandy or myself an email with whatever questions you have, and then we will send out that hiring template so you can kind of look at it and figure out how to make that work for your company. But hopefully this was helpful. We're grateful again. Thank you, Mandy and Bosun, for being a part of this. And I know that value add is incredible. So everyone have a great weekend, and just remember, stop hiring and let's start building a real team.
Thanks, Chad.
Thanks, everybody.